Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents. I am Tracy S. Phillips, and today I'm here with Jess Lourey. Jess is a two-time Edgar-nominated, two-time Goodreads Choice Awards shortlisted, Amazon Charts bestselling, International Thriller Award, Anthony Award, and Minnesota Book Award-winning author of crime fiction, nonfiction, children's books, YA, adventure, and book club fiction. She has surpassed over 1 million readers, and she is a TEDx presenter and a Psychology Today blogger. Today, we are here to discuss her adult fiction novels, including Litani, Quarry Girls, and her latest, The Reaping. Welcome, Jess Lourey.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. I'm so excited to join Blackbird Writers today. It was lovely to see you at BoucherCon, so thanks for asking me to come on board.
Yeah, we have so much to talk about. You write in so many genres: adult thriller, YA, crime fiction, children's books, and fantasy. And I love that because I think a lot of authors are, spreading their wings a little bit that way. And I see myself doing that too. So which is your favorite?
You know, that's such a good question. My favorite is whichever one I'm not writing. Because I'll be writing a thriller and I think to myself, it'd be so much easier to be writing young adult right now. And then I switch to young adult and it's like, you know what? I know a thriller much better than this. I wish I was writing a thriller. So it really is whatever I'm not writing is what I love.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
And your bio states that you write whatever story is capturing your attention at the moment. So is there a theme you feel like, or a topic that ties all of it together?
You know, I was at the Midwest Writers Conference. It's a wonderful conference in Indiana, and I've been a few times, and they get a lot of nice diversity um, in who's there. And they had one year they had Dana Kay, this fabulous publicist from Chicago. A lot of folks in the mystery community know Dana, and I was lucky to have a drink with her. And this was maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and I was telling her how I have all these different story ideas and all these different genres, and I will never be able to have a brand. And she puts down her beer and she said, well, what's the one thing every book you write has? And I said, well, secrets. And she's like, there it is. That's your brand. You write about secrets. And so it might be in my young adult novel, it is a community trapped behind a large wall. And so it's the secret of why they're there. In my book, The Reaping, there is apparently a cold case killer who is back striking again. And the secret is, who is this person and is it the same killer? So everything I write is just very secret based.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Um, and at conferences and on your website, I've heard you talk about how your childhood also informs a lot of the content in your books. Particularly, I've heard you say that you grew up near a state prison.
Yeah, in St. Cloud, Minnesota. I lived in St. Cloud in the 70s. And that is what inspired the Quarry Girls, which is my best-selling book to date. And at the time I was living there, there were 2 and maybe 3 serial killers operating. They never caught the third, so we can't say for sure if it was a serial killer or not. But St. Cloud is famous for 2 things. One is the college, and the other is the prison. And the state prison outside of St. Cloud is the only structure, man-made structure besides the Great Wall of China that you can see from space. It's so big, and it's from the quarried granite in the area. And so it was just quite the place to grow up
I
around.
I can't even imagine. And you would have curfews because there's somebody loose, and it just sounds terrifying to me.
Yeah, I wonder about it's my life, so it doesn't seem that unusual. And I wonder how many people have just in the towns we grow up and have these things in the background that you're either directly aware of or indirectly aware of. Because we moved from St. Cloud to Paynesville, just up the road, and Paynesville, Minnesota is where I set Unspeakable Things, which was my breakout novel, and it was based on the true story of a man who was abducting and returning boys in my high school years. Yeah, and
Wow.
so it's just there's just so much, so many secrets, so much crime that people don't talk to kids about that just sort of haunted me. And writing about it for me is the way I can make sense of it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Um, do you is there advice that you could give to other authors who maybe want to draw on that, you know, that those kinds of experiences that we don't quite process as young people?
Yeah.
Um, is there any advice you could give to authors to kind of pull that out?
Yeah. I think a lot of us do it naturally. It's the water we swim in, the air we breathe, and so it works itself into our stories. But I did get asked that a few years ago, and I ended up writing a book called Rewrite Your Life, and it's available at libraries all over the country, and it walks people step by step through the process because I think, especially when you're writing fiction, if it's based on truth, not necessarily the facts of what happened, but the truth of what it feels like to be terrified, or what it feels like to be a child with no voice, or what it feels like, to have your first kiss, like those sort of truths, if you can write about them from your own experience in your fiction, it resonates with readers. So I think it's an important thing to strive for.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that that honesty or purity or whatever you want to call it is, I think, how we connect our fiction with people.
I absolutely agree. And the beauty of it is your readers won't know which parts are made up and which are true. You get to hide behind the word fiction to really tell the truth. I love that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Um, so there's something about a young protagonist, right? They're naive and a little bit fearless. Um, so your adult novels, The Quarry Girls and Litany, are both written from a young adult point of view. And you're also writing a YA series, A Whisper of Poison, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so you seem particularly drawn to writing that age. Tell us why you love that point of view.
Yeah, I had written, I want to say 16 books before I wrote my first in a young adult point of view, Unspeakable Things. And before then I just thought I need to write adult books because I'm an adult. But then the story of Unspeakable Things really needed to be told through the eyes of Cassie McDowell, who's 12 years old at the start of the book, because part of the dread of it, part of the terror of it is that she, as most children, only has so much control over her life. Like she can't, if her house is scary, she has nowhere else to go. And so that next level of suspense, of dread, was really powerful and also really cathartic for me to sort of go back and give a voice to some of my experiences as a child too. That book was a hard sell. That book, was turned down by absolutely everybody. The very last, editor on our list was Jessica Tribble at Thomas& and Mercer, and she ended up picking it up, and she has since sold over 350,000 copies of that book because I think it resonates, that powerlessness of childhood. But once I found that there was interest in that sort of story, then that's all I wanted to tell for a while.
Yeah, no, I'm I'm really drawn to that point of view
Mhm.
too. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
even in my debut novel, I have, my both of my characters go back to earlier times and have those memories from
Yeah.
that age. I feel like we're so um impressionable.
Yeah, right? And maybe that is so interesting, and maybe as an author, and maybe you are returning to a point in our life where we can rewrite the story, like, just sometime when we really want things to turn out differently than they did. I don't know, but I think what you're doing, that, the flashbacks, is a really smart way to do it because it can be difficult to sell an adult book with a young adult protagonist.
Yeah, I think it is. But that's maybe a subject for a different topic. So Quarry Girls is placed in 1977, and it's about two girls who have secrets. Heather and Brenda are best friends, and they've seen something that they can't forget. Can you set this story up for our audience?
Yeah, and actually, so at the time you and I are speaking, it'll be obviously later when this airs, but at the time you and I are speaking, it's the 50th anniversary of the crime that inspired the Quarry Girls. And so in St. Cloud in 1974, St. Cloud's a real town in Minnesota. In 1974, two girls went to the store on their own and they never came back. And the police told the parents that the girls must have run away, which was not an uncommon thing to tell parents in the 70s, but the mother and father knew that was not the case with their children. It just that's not what had happened. So they had to start papering the town with pictures of their daughters. Please let us know if you see them. They ended up being found 30 days later, drowned in the quarries, and the crime has never been solved. And there were 2 other crimes, as I mentioned at the beginning, that happened in St. Cloud, in the '70s. Those both were serial killers, and in both cases, the local, law enforcement did not solve the cases. They were solved accidentally many years later, and so I grew up in this community with this feeling of, there was a lack of safety. We didn't feel like we were being protected by law enforcement. It was more, us against them growing up, and so I really wanted to explore that of when you're a kid, how do you know who the bad guys are? How do you know really who you can trust? We know who we're told we can trust, our family, our teachers, the police, but what if that's not the case? And then where do you turn? And so the book opens up in 1976, Pantown in St. Cloud, Minnesota, a real neighborhood, and it's three girls. They're in a band. Their life's ahead of them, and then they see the thing that they weren't supposed to see, and things go very wrong.
Yeah. I loved that book. It's kind
Oh,
of
thank
stuck
you.
with me. Oh, I'll show off the cover because I
Isn't
can.
that cover
I
gorgeous?
love it.
Yeah, the cover artist made it look like a 1970s paperback, sort of, ruffled at the edges. I love that cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome. Um, and it's also the perfect setting for a thriller because this is the one where they're all the homes are connected by tunnels underground, right?
Yeah.
I heard you say one time that that was actually a place. I mean, they did that.
Yeah, so this hi I geek out on this history, but I know not everybody does, so I'll keep it short, but in I wanna say 1921 or 1912, there was a man from Arizona called Samuel Pandolfo. He wanted to do a car company. He was a door-to-door salesman, he wanted to make the perfect car. He ended up building this car company in St. Cloud, Minnesota, out of all the places, and he created this basically this town. It was called Pantown, Samuel Pandolfo, Pantown. 53 houses, a hotel, a fire department, and then this enormous factory that is still there in St. Cloud. And rumor had it that he also created tunnels joining all 53 houses to the factory. So in the winter, you could get to work without having to go outside. I could never, ever verify that story. I went to the Historical Society in St. Cloud. I joined a Facebook group for St. Cloud folks that has like 40,000 people in it. I asked everybody I possibly could. Nobody would confirm it. And then after the book came out about 3 weeks, a man came to my signing and he's like, I've been to the tunnels. They're there." And since then, I've had 2 other people confirm that they are actually there. In people's basements, a lot of the folks that own those houses now don't know that on the other side is a door leading to a tunnel leading to a old factory.
Oh, they've walled over them now,
They're walled
or
over. Yeah, yeah, yep, a lot of them
wow.
are.
Well,
Yeah.
I would think because I mean it's just another place where people can get in, or I don't know. It's some
Exactly, another entry point. I mean, if you think about being in your basement and watching TV, and then you hear a noise on the other side of the wall and you feel it's a mouse, but what if it's people? What if there's a whole bunch of stuff going on right on the other side of your door? It freaks me out.
It does, me too.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. But I want to circle back to this idea of community, because that also seems like another theme in some of your books.
Mhm.
But first, I want to talk about Litany, because that's another one that I really enjoyed, and it has another young protagonist, Frankie Jubilee. Great name, by the
Yeah,
way.
thank you.
And she has just moved in with her estranged mother. So you dive a little bit into this subject of bullying in this story. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so with Litany, that was inspired by the Satanic Panic of the 80s. And so this tiny town outside of Minneapolis called Jordan, Minnesota, was the epicenter of the Satanic Panic in the 80s. That town, and then also a town in California, which is just such a weird fact. But there were, newspapers, the New York Times was out there, the Chicago Sun was out there just to cover the Satanic Panic. And what got lost in all of the articles I read was the experience of the kids who, depending on who you read, either made all of this up or were horribly abused. And the idea of what makes a child become an abuser stuck with me because they're obviously still victims, right? There's obviously something happening to them. And I really
Right.
wanted to explore that. And to go back to your question about community, I think that is another theme in my books because I think it is the remedy, the cure to secrets. I think we only get out together and if we share what we're most afraid of. And so with that book, I really wanted to write it in a way that the kids who are now adults and were forgotten about still have a way to find community.
But communities can hold secrets too.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's, I'm reading Reaping right now, and that's like a whole community of Finnish people who have some big secrets.
Yeah, yeah. In my book Bloodline, I make a German community the center of the secrets, and my editor told me I can't do the Germans again, so I picked the Finns for the reaping. Because it's Minnesota, we only have so many choices. But yeah, no, that's very perceptive because I grew up in a small town, and there's all of the positives that people take care of each other when there's loss or when your power goes out or when you're snowed in, but also people keep each other in a very tight mold, and that requires you to not share secrets, to not tell anybody secrets, and to look away if you see something bad happening, so you don't want to upset the community. And so it becomes this very sort of
Mm.
deadly cement that everybody gets stuck in. And for me, that's not true community. It's that small town sickness that you sometimes see.
Well, and that kind of comes back to, who can you trust?
Yeah,
And when you're
exactly.
told that you can trust the police officers and the people in charge, and they're actually the ones telling you to keep the secrets.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. That the because of the 50th anniversary of the story that inspired the Quarry Girls, the podcast Crime Junkies just did a really, really good rundown of that whole case. And they went into all the potential corruption, all the dropped balls, all the way that the family was let down. They did a really good job with that. So if somebody's interested in learning more about it, that's a great resource.
what's can you say the name of the website or the podcast again?
Yeah, it's Crime
Crime
Junkies.
Junkies.
Crime
Okay.
Junkies, yeah, and the family or the story it's about is the Reker family, Reker, and there's still a reward out there if anybody has information because there's still justice to be served.
Right.
Mhm.
Um, so do you want to talk about The Reaping? Because that is your newest release.
Yeah. Yes.
Set that one up a little bit, and you've got the two detectives, and I lost my notes.
Oh, it's
Oh,
okay. Van and Harry.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So the Reaping actually started 2 stories ago with a short story called Catcher in a Lie. I don't like to write short stories. Do you like to write short stories?
um, it's really different, isn't it?
I think it's much harder because you have to have all the goodness of a novel, but crunch it into this tiny tiny little postage stamp of a story. So I normally say no when people ask me to write short stories. I'm just not good at it. But my editor asked me, and I love her. So I said yes. And so for the first time and probably only time in my life, the whole story came to me, the whole twist. Um, just everything. And so I wrote it out in Costa Rica and it's set in Costa Rica, sent it off to her. She liked it. She published it. And then she came back and she said, I really like those 2 characters. So the main characters are Van Reed, she's a cold case agent, and Harry Steinbeck, and he's a forensic scientist. They are very much Felix and Oscar, the odd couple, right? They're just at odds with each other.
You
And
describe them as orange juice and toothpaste.
yeah.
I love that.
Oh, I can taste it.
Yeah.
And so I wrote The Taken Ones, which was the first full-length book in the series. It sold really well. It got nominated for an Edgar, which was an incredible honor. And so my uh, editor asked me to write The Reaping. And I had this idea for a book rattling around in my head ever since the Quarry Girls. I was interviewed by Mindy Carlson. She's a mystery writer, a great person. And during the interview, I think she lives out in DC. She doesn't live in Minnesota, but during the interview, she said, you know, in Minnesota, which is where I live, you have a nursing home for serial killers. And I said, what? And she said, yes, it's people who are highly dangerous, but also largely immobile now. It's a special facility south of Minneapolis in this town called Faribault. And I looked it up, and sure enough, there's a nursing home for serial killers. So I wanted to work that into a book. And so then when my editor said, "Will you write The Reaping?" I said, "Yes, and it's going to have a nursing home for serial killers. I'm going to set it in northern Minnesota." She said, "You can't go after the Germans." So I said, "Well, Finns, here we go on this ride." And then I dug into what I love to do, which is small town secrets. When people are not being honest about what's happening, it snowballs. And so this one has the biggest twist I've written so far, I think, because the secret is pretty dark.
Yeah, it is for
Yeah.
sure. I'm 15 pages from the end, and you know what I'll be doing right after this interview.
Yeah, finish that one.
Yeah. It's so good.
Thank you.
Um, so on a personal level, you do deal with a lot of this dark matter. Do you ever feel like you need space after diving into these characters and these situations?
Yeah.
How do
You
you?
know, yeah, right. How do I shake off the willies?
Yeah.
It's a real thing, especially when we're talking about my true crime inspired thrillers where I am
Mhm.
reading about things that really happened to real people who are just like you and me going about our day, and then it's ripped away from them. And so it really does take a toll. But also in some ways it's cathartic because what I try to do in all of my books is make the victim the center of the story and give them the voice and the power in the ending. And that is really for me as an author really empowering. A lot of crime fiction, this is changing these days, but a lot of historic crime fiction centers the detective or the police officer or
Right.
the serial killer, right? They become the center of the story. And there's something about wresting that away and putting it in the hands of the person who I think deserves to tell it that I find very empowering. And I also do write, I actually got started writing rom-com mysteries. And so I've been editing those. My current publisher bought all of the backlist and is republishing the Murder by Month mysteries. And that's been a surprisingly nice break because I will write the dark thing and then I'll edit the light thing. So dark light, dark light. So it
Yeah,
works.
that's good. That sounds like a great way to sort of cleanse.
Yeah, exactly. A spiritual mental cleanse. Yeah.
Yeah. And you are writing 2 books a year?
Yeah. Yes.
That's crazy.
I was teaching full time until 2021, and then once I retired, now I do 2 books a year. My most comfortable schedule, I think, would be 1 book every 9 months.
Hmm.
But there's something I grew up very poor, and the idea of just being relaxed about my job is not an option to me. So I'm always like, it's gonna be taken away. I don't know how much longer I'll have this. I'm gonna just write very, very quickly. And so that's the hamster wheel I've been on for a while.
Yeah. Um, I, I don't think anybody's going to take it away from you. Just,
You
just
don't
saying.
know. You don't know.
I don't, but um, so what's coming out next?
So I am right now well, not as we speak, but before I got on the Zoom call, I was editing The Laughing Dead, which is the third in the Harry and Van thriller.
Okay.
So the Taken Ones, The Reaping, and then The Laughing Dead. And then I have edits on my young adult novel, A Whisper of Poison, that comes out a year from this December. And then I think I'm going to go back to my true crime inspired roots and really write another Minnesota set small town secret haven thriller.
Sounds great. Well, I can't wait to read all of them.
You.
I really love your writing.
Oh, thank you, Tracy. That's
Yeah,
very kind.
yeah. Um, and so where can our audience find your books or reach out to you if they need to?
Yeah, I love to point people toward IndieBound. And so
Mhm.
IndieBound is a site where you can find any book at your nearest independent bookstore, because these bookstores are the cornerstones of our community. If people want signed books, Once Upon a Crime here in Minneapolis has all of my books signed, and they'll ship them anywhere, I think anywhere in the world. Yeah, so wherever books are sold.
Awesome. And your website is,
Oh, yeah, www.jesslowry.com. I am on tour through October, so I will be traveling around a little bit too.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time, your valuable time.
Yours
And
too.
and
Yeah.
really good luck with your next books. Can't wait to read them.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a delightful conversation.
All right. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah, see you.
Bye.